Okay, good evening, everybody. Hope everyone can hear me, and thanks for joining. Right, I'm in a different country. I'm away from my usual setup, so I'm going to ask the question of, first of all, can you actually hear me? Hopefully you can. What's even more annoying is I'm on a single screen on my laptop, so I'm going to have to sort of bring up the chat box every so often just so I can see it. If someone can let me know in the chat whether or not you can hear me, I'm using one of these TikToker microphones I managed to buy off the internet. So I'm hoping it works. It worked well in the testing, and we'll just wait to see whether or not someone says that they can hear me before we start rabbiting on about stuff. But I do have a beer in hand. The beach is that way, although the sun has pretty much set now, so there'll be no sunbathing whatsoever. But yeah, we'll see how this one goes. Still not got told by anyone that... Jared, thank you. All is good. Perfect. I'm not sure how long the delay is, but that's good enough for me. So thanks everyone for joining in. As the title says, hey, if Bitcoin ain't going on holiday, then neither are we. That being said, I must admit, I haven't really done too much studying in the news. So the news section is going to be pretty small. I think there's still enough to talk about. I also think we can talk about some charting kind of things, but today may well be the time we crack it under 60 minutes. We'll have to wait and see. Hope everyone is good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize the chat, but I will keep on popping up every so often. So if you do have any questions, please let me know. As I said, I don't even have a mouse because I had to plug this in. So I'm having to use my, whatever it is, the keypad on here. So not the best. All the excuses are out the way. Let us just crack on and see where we get to with everything. Can't lift in my skirt. Okay. I'll sort out all of these charts. Hopefully you can see the main things. But let's get BTC up straight away. We are on the weekly as we usually do. And what is there really to say? Yes, we have had a nice bounce off that $49,000 level. And this week, pretty much fueled by the news that came out today, we have seen a positive move to the upside. However, as I've mentioned for the last couple of weeks at the moment, we're still in this downtrend. Yes, I agree, potentially still forming some sort of bull flag pattern, but ultimately we're ranging and we are still continuing with those higher highs and higher lows. So I don't think 61,000, currently where we're at the moment, is anything to get too excited about, but I do still take the positives that we saw from the back end of last week with that positive move up. Sadly, with this weekly candle, we've still got 5 days till it closes. And as we go down onto the lower time frames, we are going to see that there is a few obstacles potentially in our way. If we have a look at some of the other ones, and I'm on Casper, but my face is probably in the way, so we'll enlarge that one. Again, on the weekly, for me, probably the strongest altcoin still out there in the market. Almost a complete opposite of what we're seeing with Bitcoin and most of the other altcoins out there. It is higher highs and higher lows, so a positive place to be. And actually where I see the potential, I'm not sure that the Bitcoin was a true low test just because the wick to the upside was a little bit too long. This one, however, this low test is actually looking pretty good. And with it being in a rising, trending higher market, then we can actually take a lot more credence from that one. So Casper still looking strong. Again, lower time frames, we'll have a look at where that is going, but I'm still happy with that. Ethereum has not really done much, unfortunately, since the launch of the ETF, and then with the market rolling over last week, it has really struggled to make any sort of significant bounce back. And we haven't even cleared that sort of 2,900, 3,000 level that we can kind of see. Sorry, I keep forgetting to draw things now. We can kind of see around about here, which for me would at least give it some sort of, I don't know, on par performance with where some of the other altcoins and particularly Bitcoin is seeing it. I don't think the ETF is looking as attractive as the Bitcoin ETF has been. It certainly is not as many buys. Now, arguably that could just be, a dream for the institutions that are actually buying it, being able to hoover up a lot more quicker. But the uptake is certainly not as big as what we've seen there. And I think that sentiment is rolling over into where Ethereum is. And unfortunately, Ethereum being the largest altcoin out there, it's having that knock-on effect with the overall crypto market outside of Bitcoin. So total 2, total 3, not looking great. And Bitcoin dominance, as we'll have a look at later, is still unfortunately on the rise. I say unfortunate because, most of us don't have a huge amount of Bitcoin in our portfolio. It's more altcoins. So we really want to see that flip. And we'll have a look at some levels later on that may be where we start to see that flip, or certainly, I was going to say continuation of the bull market. A restart, I think, is probably a better term of the bull market. And then we get into Tau. Now, Tau's an interesting one. I'll be honest, I'm still not back in Tau. So I sidestepped at 300, about 60% of my Tau. And I mentioned it last week. I kind of watched it go all the way down to 170, never bought. And maybe I was holding off last week out of just petulance of I want it to go lower because I've seen it lower and I should have bought it lower. But actually, when we have a look at the price, and even on the weekly chart, you can see here, there's nothing really that's saying that we have done anything spectacular. We're still in a downtrend, even with the drop down to 170 and then that rise back up to 330 last week. We haven't created a higher high from that. We are still making lower highs and lower lows. The downtrend's continuing. I would argue that the head and shoulders, which is pretty blatant and staring at your face at the moment, is still kind of valid. I know people talk about it doesn't work. If you put it on the logarithmic, it works pretty fine. And there's still room to go down. So I'm not getting too excited about that. Again, we'll have a look at altcoins on lower time frames and what that can mean later on. And I'll give you an indication of where I will accept defeat and get back in at potentially a loss, or where I'm looking to get down to later on. Right, I'm gonna have to do this each time, but I don't want to miss any questions or anything. So let me just bring up the chat box, make sure no one's asking anything. No, hello to everyone in chat. Thanks for that. Everyone can hear, which is good. Holiday's great so far. Really enjoying it. Still got another couple of weeks. So next week again, we'll be out here. The week after that, I should be back in the UK. Enjoying the run up to the big election. Yeah, well, it's certainly getting interesting. And funnily enough, the only real news that I've sort of caught was Donald Trump's return, shall we call it, to X, and then the big interview last night that he had. It might be an early hours this morning, don't know, with Elon. Now, I haven't actually watched that yet, so for those of you that have, you may be able to add some comment in the chat box as to where it is. But from scanning through crypto Twitter today, it's blatantly obvious that Donald Trump and Elon didn't talk about crypto, because had they of, the sound bites would have been numerous. What I did find interesting is I say we've, because certainly myself, we've been, looking at this presidential election, and I suppose there's two camps at the moment, obviously, because there's the Republicans and the Democrats. But what I mean, from a crypto point of view, there seems to be Donald Trump, who has so far been quite forthcoming in his favoritism towards cryptocurrency, certainly Bitcoin, and he's been talking about that on the campaign trail, whereas the Democrats and Harris really not said anything about it, kind of edges towards believing that not particularly a fan, exactly sticking with the status quo. But what I did find quite interesting is Donald Trump launched 20 core promises to the American people. And I'm not my place to necessarily run for all of them because they're politicalized, and that's not really what I'm here for. But what is interesting is it didn't feature once in his 20 of his core promises. There was not one mention of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. And what's even more worrying potentially is number 13 is to keep the US dollar at the world's reserve currency. So for us Bitcoin fanatics, that's obviously not what we want. We believe fiat currency is dead. And I just think it's interesting. Does this man actually really have any true interest within cryptocurrency, or is he just, as I've mentioned numerous times over the last few months, using this as sound bites, getting the good polling data from it, and then just trying to utilize that to sort of stir up some support when he gets into power, just knocking it on the head like a typical politician would do. Now, I think we, regardless of whether or not we live in the US, I think it might be 5th or the 8th of November, whenever the US elections are, a massive event it's going to be for anyone that's in cryptocurrency, because right now it seems Republicans, bull market back on, Democrats, probably not a bull market back on, or if it is, it's certainly not going to be to the level that we hope for, or maybe even have seen in the past in terms of percentage gains. So I just find it interesting that actually Trump given an opportunity to, again, bang that drum one more time. And let's face it, 20 things there. Some of them, I'm not here to say which one should have been overtaken from it, But ultimately, the fact that we haven't mentioned Bitcoin, he hasn't mentioned Bitcoin, as I say, slightly worrying. Right, enough on that one. I'm going to start closing some of these down as we go because it's got so many tabs open. So the X conversation, as I mentioned, huge return to X by Donald Trump, interviewed by Elon. And what I found really interesting, although I haven't listened to it yet because I don't have 2 hours spare to do that, is that he has had over a billion, with a B, billion, I don't want to say views as in the interview has been seen over a billion times, but certainly eyeballs on it in terms of retweets and just sound bites taken in the comments and all of this. 1 billion views in less than 24 hours. So there's obviously a lot of interest within what Donald Trump has to say. I know, Elon has been banging the drum for months now about mainstream media on the decline and X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, as sort of like a real freedom of speech kind of platform. And, that was, one of the things that's been talked here. And some of the things that I've been seeing is the amount of negative press from mainstream media about this one interview alone, which, Harry, why are you talking about this? Because, we're only here to talk about Bitcoin and altcoins. But the reality is that a lot of the retail and I suppose even the big players that we deal with in the crypto market utilize Twitter far more than they do any other platform to talk about research, advertise, promote, fearmonger, whatever you want to do with it, cryptocurrency. So for me, this is the go-to place for that kind of thing. And, when we get back to our core understanding of why we want to be in Bitcoin and in crypto, there's always a little part of us somewhere. Sadly for me, it seems to be growing more and more that has that tinfoil hat that, big governments are bad. I want something that can be completely untouched by them and just be in the control of my own destiny. And the way that mainstream media is going at the moment, the way Big Brother is going on, George Orwell, 1984, all of those kind of things, which again, I don't want to get into, at least we have this platform at the moment to share our views freely. And nothing was put better than Elon. I'm surprised Simon didn't actually post this, but we had Thierry Breton, who I think is the commissioner of the EU, but hey, I don't really follow that stuff, so I'm not necessarily too sure. But he effectively sent an open letter to Elon, effectively saying why he shouldn't undertake this interview with Donald Trump on the X platform. And I just thought, what a perfect response to go by. One, great character from a very interesting movie, a fantastic movie at its time, probably would never be made now. But yeah, so Elon just not giving two shits about anything and just saying how he is. Whether or not he's going to come back to bite him in the arse, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, not afraid of any of that. So good on him. And right, let's get on to a little bit more serious news. Because one of the things we talked about last week was the relatively sharp collapse of the Japanese market and the Nikkei and everything else. We rolled on talking about carry trades and how that can have a wider implication on the global economy and why people were blaming the rise in interest rates in Japan on crypto crashing last week. But what's actually massively interesting is the Nikkei and the Japanese stock market seem to have almost fully recovered from that crash last week. So, hey, what the hell do I know? Thinking that this might take weeks, if not months, to play out to find a bottom. We've actually seen a fairly significant recovery from that drop. And bearing in mind that drop is the worst drop in nearly 40 years in Japan. To see it recover in a matter of a week and a half is nothing short of monumental. But what is interesting is we haven't really seen that huge, climb back up from Bitcoin. I'm going to have some water, but I will continue on the beer. Before the crash, Bitcoin was at 70K. Nikkei's almost recovered, but Bitcoin's still lagging around at 60K, maybe only making about 50% of that back. So sitting on its hand and wondering what it is to do. Now, we did see a little bit of I brought this chart up here. So here's the Nikkei. So the crash started at 37,500, went all the way down to about 31,000, and we're back up above 36,000. So you can see that climb up. Now, of course, we don't get into detailed trading on these sorts of assets, so I've not really got much to say. You could argue that it's just a 50% pullback. We've got a 50 EMA that's in front of us as well. Maybe those things are going to have a knock-on effect in the future. But for what we're seeing right now, fairly stellar return from the Japanese stock markets, not reflected in Bitcoin. But we did get some other news today, which I think has helped this pump slightly, which I think is worth talking about. And that's the PPI data that came out. As you can see in this news article here, so the expectation was it to be about 2.3%. It actually fell to 2.2%, so it was a greater falling than before. And the core PPI actually dropped down to 2.4%, whereas expectation was going to be at 2.7%. So as it mentions there, positive sides that, you know, the United States might have finally got to grips with their economy. It's in a downward trend, and as such, maybe providing further confirmation and the data that Powell requires every time he mentions it in his interviews, to see a rate cut in the interest rates, which could happen in September. Now, it's going to be the back end of September. We're only in the middle of August right now. The reason there won't be one unless it's an emergency is because the Fed are on holiday until then. They basically take August and September off. Now, that's a positive move there. PPIs for goods and services. What we've got tomorrow is the CPI, which is sort of the consumer side of things. And again, we're still expecting, if I get the Forex factory open, I think it just takes a little bit longer. So with the CPI data tomorrow, so we've got the UK as well. So don't be confused. Tomorrow at 8 o'clock, we've got the UK, which actually is forecast to go slightly up. But in the grand scheme of the global markets, we don't really care about the UK. It's the US. And what have we got at the moment? They reckon it's going to be, actually this is interesting. They reckon it's going to be round about the same, maybe with a slight increase. I wasn't expecting that. I don't know if that's just updated today or not. But what we now need to see, because everyone takes the forecast and they make their assessments from that. And then when the actual comes in, if it's better than or worse, it's how the market reacts. So if we get it as forecast, the markets will be absolutely fine, even if it has gone slightly up. But if the actual is up even higher, so instead of being 0.02, it's 0.03 or higher, we might see that market and any gains that we've made today soon evaporate. Likewise, if it goes lower than expected, stays at the previous levels of 0.1 or even better, then, and, you know, the core going down into the twos, then yeah, one, that's going to get people excited. That's going to be the kind of data that Powell's going to be hard, or Powell's going to find hard to batten off and suggest that we are in the right stages for a rate cut. Why do we care about the rate cuts? We can start lending out money again. People, you know, T-bills getting printed, all of that kind of stuff, just sort of like reinvigorate the markets, and ultimately risk on is a big big green tick, and off we go. And that generally also spills over into the crypto market. So it's why we do talk about, and we used to talk about it incredibly a lot 12 months or so ago, CPI and PPI data. Probably not so much now, but I think we've got to a critical juncture right now where we are expecting rate drops to occur, and really the data that we're relying on is things like the CPI. Now, the only thing about that is, and this is just me playing devil's advocate, that's not the right one, close that. Here's the inflation rate, here's the CPI data. And I suppose the problem that I have at the moment, or not problem, because it's not my job to deal with this, is Powell is, you know, he's looking for defined trends. And yet you can argue March 3.5, then we had April 3.4, May was 3.3, we've had June at 3, July, which comes out in August, that's tomorrow, see where that goes. But it's still fluctuating. You know, we've had 4 of a nice stellar drop, but actually if you go back over the last 6 months, we've been down at levels like this and then gone from 3.1 back up to 3.5. And so, yes, I think if we do make it lower, if we do get into the 2s, that trend is continuing. But if we start to stabilize or slightly climb up, unfortunately, that's going to potentially give Powell the wiggle room just to say, you know what, we need a bit more data, because this is, you know, it's all over the place. It's up, it's down, it's up again. And we can't really get a clear understanding of whether or not we've got this under control. So that's what I'm saying. Markets might react quite interestingly tomorrow. For those of you that do have any trades open, as I always say in days like this, just make sure you got your stops in good positions. Take profit if you feel that now's a good time to take profit, and just wait, you know, for the timing in and around that, because the CPI stuff, which happened today, although the new, sorry, PPI, which happened today, if we drop it onto the 1 hour chart, and I'll zoom in a bit, hopefully, it's so weird not having the chat there because I have no idea if people are still there or not. But the data came out, I'm gonna have to be, am I in US time? No, I'm in UK time still. Okay, so data came out in and around here, so sort of 1 o'clock. We had a slight increase, plateau, and then suddenly, bang. So 3.5 hours afterwards. And it's starting to come back down, which is unfortunately how market makers do this sort of thing. But it doesn't mean that we're going to get that knee-jerk reaction immediately. So for those of you with open trades, just because the data comes out doesn't mean you're going to see a plus or minus straight away. So just, that's why I don't like to trade on those kind of days, but that's just me. In terms of some of the other websites we have a look at, fear and greed. I mean, this is interesting as well because fear and greed, we're still in 31, we're still in fear. Yesterday it was extreme fear, last week it was extreme fear. Why we talk about extreme fear? Thought we're in a bull market. The only thing about that is when you're in, unfortunately, to the left of this indicator, good news doesn't really have that much effect, and it's bad news that people react on. Whereas when we're in the green, it's the exact opposite. Bad news kind of gets pushed to one side, good news gets pumped on. So the fact that PPI has come in strong, yep, it had a bit of a reaction, market makers having their little fun. But as we've just saw, and we'll go into more detail, the prices start to come back down because ultimately people are still fearful. So I don't think there's anything to get too excited about just yet. And if we have a look at my overarching sort of tick of where things to go, good that BlackRock are buying. So it's in the left-hand column. Hopefully my face isn't in the way. I'll just move it up and then I'll move my mouse. So the first one close to the dates is BlackRock. So we had that time last week where they didn't buy anything, which is the first time in weeks, if not months, they hadn't bought anything. Then back into last week, they thought, you know what, let's turn this up a notch, buying a whole host compared to most other people. But even this end of last Friday and then yesterday, pretty slow. Only saving grace really is Grayscale weren't getting rid of too much, so we could see a positive inflow on the ETFs yesterday. We don't have the data for today, but that kind of stagnation, it's just not flying off the shelves as quickly as it had been. And let's face it, if it isn't for BlackRock, we'd be in a bit of trouble here. Since I've got this one open, I should really just show you the ETS for the Ethereum ETS for comparison. I just need to zoom in. How on earth am I going to zoom in? Oh yeah, here we go. So I'll just use my finger. That's it. So try and get as much of this data in so you can see it. I mean, we're still net down, and that's because Grayscale 2.3 billion worth of sales. So yeah, it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. BlackRock 900 million. Can't remember the rest of the orders. So there's some good buys within there, of course, but still net down, which is kind of showing that not had the uptake that BTC did, as I mentioned earlier. Right, let's close that. Let's close a few of these other ones as we're just working our way through. And then we're going to quickly move on. Sorry, let me just do some admin, get the chat box up, make sure I've not missed anything too significant. And then we'll get into some price action. That's all looking good. Okay, Jared's put, would they really let the market fall in the run up to arguably one of the most important elections in a while? I mean, you would argue, you would definitely argue no. They would try and do their best to prop it up, because what the Democrats don't want is for them to, enter into a recession, which I was going to bring the news articles up. You just have to trust me when I talk about this element here. They don't want to be entering up into a recession, confirming that a recession is on in a lead up to an election, because what's that going to do? It's just going to give the Republicans some ammunition to say, you've nuked our economy, you're worthless, let's go. So I agree. They're going to try and prop that bad boy up as best as they can. Bank of America, interestingly, they just came out with an article today that said they actually don't foresee the US entering a recession in 2024, which is a bit of a change, because last week everyone was talking that we were probably going to get that recession when we start the next quarter in October. We still got JP Morgan, however, they're sort of saying that the odds of a recession by year's end is still on the increase. They're putting that around about 35%. So we're just getting conflicting information at the moment, which I don't I'm not surprised, I suppose, that these things are hard to judge. But I do find it interesting that whereas last week everyone seemed to suggest we were going into recession, now we're starting to get that information. And some people trying to say, actually, maybe we don't, maybe they're just trying to dampen that down a little bit. I'm sure that the government, the Democrats, everyone will try and do their damnedest to hold it off, even if it is just holding it off until November and then just let the world collapse after that. They don't want to be seen as going into recession on, especially so close to the end of their shift, in inverted commas. Jan's put, I wonder if the US putting interest rates down would bring back the Japanese carry trade issue. I think it probably would, because even if the Japanese interest rates go up by 0.5, if the interest rates in the US come down, then it kind of negates that. Now, what would be interesting is people are already talking about, it's not the fact that interest rates are going to drop in September. That's almost a foregone conclusion by the entire market. It's how much are we going to drop them by? Are we going to drop them by 25 basis points? Or actually what people are really wanting to see is a drop by 50 basis points. Okay, so 0.5. And so there's almost like, even you're damned if you, damned if you don't. If you don't drop it, market's going to nuke. If you only drop it by a smidge, people aren't going to be probably happy with that either. They want to see a significant step back. The rest of the world is suggesting that everything's fine and dandy and we can start dropping interest rates. US have been criticized for how sluggish they've been in doing that. So people are now expecting them to catch up by actually dropping it by more than 0.5. Matter of fact, since we're talking about it, let us have a look at what they believe the percentage rise is going to be. Just accept those, close all this. So you can see here, I don't know if you can see this, but you've got these two columns here, 45.5%. All that's represented right now is a rate cut. This is for the 18th of September's Fed meeting. So nobody is 0% probability that it's going to stay at its current levels. So the column you've got on your left-hand side, which represents 45.5%, believe that it's only going to be by 25 basis points, whereas over 50% currently think it's going to be by 50 basis points. No one thinks it's going to be by 75, but you can kind of see the optimism and potential hurdle that we might trip over just based off that alone. So that's why it's always interesting to see how these things play out. They do impact the market, the confidence, and like I say, crypto has not decoupled from the stock markets. Yeah, there may be times where it runs a little bit stronger, but unfortunately, I don't believe that is the case yet. And so we want to see interest rates come down so people can borrow some money so they can just start putting it back into the stock market. Risk assets go on, and there we go. Now, of course, I think everyone's spoken about this for the last sort of 2 years, about when Feds do make the cuts, a couple of months, a couple of quarters after that, we see a massive downturn in the economy. So we've got to take that into account as well. But will that nicely tie in with the potential end of a bull run anyway in 2025? We'll just have to wait and see on that one. But yeah, that's where I think we currently sit at the moment with that. Moving on to Bitcoin and where everything is. So, yep, the standard chart that all of you are used to. Hopefully you can kind of see this. For me, this screen is tiny compared to the one I have at home. But I suppose it should replicate fine with you guys. So we're on the 12-hour chart at the moment. Why have I still got this one up? Well, interestingly enough, I think there's plenty of data here because obviously we had that climb up, right? So we shot down, we hit the 618, beautifully bounced back up. We spent a bit of time under the 382, and actually we managed to shoot above it. We hit the 236 on the wick, but then the 50 EMA on the 12-hour has been pushing us down on 4 separate occasions since then, including today. And interestingly enough, we wicked up to it, but we've been battered back down. And we've just been bouncing effectively between the 50 EMA and the 382 level. And for me, I just don't see any optimism necessarily needed to be had until we break that 63,000. But if I'm being completely and brutally honest about where it is, until we breach that all-time high, until we take out these, previous lower highs, there's nothing really to get too excited about. 70K then, in the psychological level, then we're talking about 73,000 and beyond. But if we take it onto the daily, I mean, that has hardly moved the 50 EMA. because we've been ranging in around those for so close. But it's got a lot, that 50 EMA today currently sits at 62,300. So that's 62 to 63,000 level. Pretty important from a fib level, from an EMA level, where we go. And actually, if you want it to be like that, I mean, just look. If I can do this quickly, probably not. Just look in that yellow box. And all of the other closed and open candles, there's just so much in that level. And so it's just a previous price history level, as well as the psychological levels of the two other indicators, just to show that it's quite a big issue at the moment. And for me, let me try and get it on the clean chart, because I think this is a bit messy to necessarily look at. What I would say is, just because we've got this open, I've got the previous levels, let's just get high block. This needs resetting. Of course it does. You just have to bear with me again. If you're not already, maybe you should go and grab yourself a beer and join me on this. I will try and put some positivity in at some stage. And this isn't me whilst I'm just lining this up because I'm a perma bear or anything. I want this market to go up as much as anybody. But I'm just saying what I see. And I do feel probably the last 3 months worth of calls, I'd say 2/3 of those have probably been a more bearish outlook. And I don't think that's been necessarily a bad thing. I think we've always had the big picture in our mind of, yes, once we get rid of this selling may go away, we get back into October, I think we're going to see some benefits, especially with end of October. It's falling right into the presidential election. I think there's a real catalyst there to take the market up. But until then, we're kind of treading water. Bitcoin's treading water and altcoins are necessarily bleeding. But you can kind of see, hopefully here, there really isn't much. And what is interesting is the levels that I drew out last week, after this drop down, there's just no massive uptake. Certainly for the longs. Any long liquidation level will be below current price action. And it's still relatively dark purple. There's not much interest. We are getting some build-ups on the shorts. Not a huge amount, but that's sort of like 66.8 to 67,000. Starting to go slightly green. Maybe even starting to turn yellow. But really longs, no one's that interested in doing that at the moment. And with volume and interest being so low, it doesn't take much to move the market in either direction. So it's a market maker's paradise right now. They don't have to expend that much to move the market. But like going back to the charts and having a look at this one, hopefully it's a clean chart. It is. Perfect. So I mentioned this before. Yeah, so you got these, haven't you? I mean, just so we can be clear on it. Sorry, I'm having to use my finger and the trackpad, so not the best. But you get, no, that was really bad. You get the idea, yeah? So downtrend, okay, fine. Levels that we need to have a look at then to break the downtrend. Well, first of all, this shoulder here, we've talked about this shoulder before, which is set end of February. That's what we came down into. And we bounced fairly strong from that, so that's good to see. I will offer my opinion on the next line as to why I think it is maybe important that we actually retest that level again. But I think, a support level like that being retested and bounced from the second time shows a lot stronger sentiment within the market than it just being reacted from once. The other level that unfortunately we have to start talking about is this down here. I mean, we can't really ignore it anymore because once we lose 50K properly, there's not really much there below, between 50K and 45K. And really we start to see the majority of the price action in between 41 and 44,000. So we need to draw that. So these are kind of levels that I'm looking at. But what worries me right now is, even without me drawing anything, is we've had this move down, this sudden move down from 70,000 to 50,000. We've come back up to 60. You don't need to take your shoes off to know that's a 50% retracement. What do we normally say happens after sharp moves in either direction? 50% retracement. And then it even needs to consolidate and get a rocket ship up. Rocket ship, that was. Apologies if there was a hard T there. Didn't mean that. Or we see it roll over. And I just get the feeling at the moment, I mean, today's candle's not closed, so anything can happen. But this is more in a rolling over stage right now, which could mean that we're heading potentially at least down to retest these lows here. I mean, I would argue anywhere from 54,000 down. retesting those, and then it's what we do there, or unfortunately we continue that downtrend. And I know what people will say, because I'm one of it, and I said it last week. I'm going to try and keep the yellow boxes on. If it gets too messy, I apologize. Is, you know, we've respected this channel quite well, and this one too. So why would we not bounce up, consolidate, and make our move back up there? And of course that could happen. 67,000 could well be the next target, but a rejection from there, and I'm going to be putting myself back towards the 52 level as it just comes and hits down at this second level down here. Maybe that's what we need to see it back in September. It builds up into October, and we get October, and off we go. Maybe that's where it is. But taking that a little bit aside, because I'm sure some of you will be saying, Harry, you're a hypocrite because you talked about that last week. I can't ignore that strong bounce from that there. But the fact is, after we had that bounce and we came up, we stuttered and we stalled, and we've just come back down. I'm going to draw a little fib now, because you know I like to. We'll take it from this move down to here. Even if we just do it on the bodies, what actually happened then? Zoom in. So obviously 1 to 0, fine. Shot straight back up to the 618. We love the 618. Flew back down. I mean, the 382, but you could argue the wick was coming close there, but it's hovered in and around the 382, and then we've been stuck at the moment between the 382 and the 5. So nothing in terms of the levels that we've actually hit over the last couple of days have been that much of a surprise. They've shot up maybe faster than we thought, but they've turned around at levels that, you know, maybe we shouldn't have expected them to do any better at, 618 being the golden level. So yeah, no real surprise there, which is why I haven't really changed my stance or panicked too much with being out, because I actually did sell 50% of my dot as well. So it's quite a large portion of my portfolio that is sat on the side at the moment, but I haven't YOLO'd back in. I'm wanting to see how this one plays out. The other thing that's got my attention, throwing out the sort of, oh, it's on Tau. Let me just change that one. Let's go to Bitcoin. What's happened there? I wasn't supposed to do that. Sorry, just bear with me. And then let's, nope, that's not the market maker chart. Sorry here, excuse me. Let's try that one again. That's on Tau. We'll come to Tau a little bit later on. So we've got the BitTensor. We've got the Bitcoin chart here, and I think I kind of touched on this last week. And if I didn't, I apologize. I'm fairly certain that I did. Sorry for sniffing then. So we've had this sharp move back down, and this is going back to sort of retesting those levels I was talking about, and how that's, you know, relatively good. In terms of proving that the previous bounce level was actually strong support, creates a healthier market in terms of moving up. Why do we say that? I did talk about this last week, because we look for those bottoming patterns, don't we? W formation, double bottom, whatever you want to call it, an ideal bottoming pattern. And so this is what I'm seeing, not to mention the fact that we have this green vector candle still down here, which, you know, I would not be surprised to see, especially if data doesn't go our way tomorrow, see that move start to move back down, and then sort of, I don't know whether or not we interact with this 800 EMA, and it's sort of we find some point sort of down here at 52,000, or as I mentioned, we just hit the top part of this. We're looking at that 53, taking in some of these weeks as well. But that that still live vector candle down there, it's curious for me. I think it is a magnet in which ultimately we could move down towards. That's what we look at, but it's not necessarily a negative move, because we would then get that W formation, giving us that strength down here off an EMA, closing out the vector candle to give us that positive move back up. I don't necessarily want us to see 67 straight away and then it be rejected back down, so we kind of lose the impetus of the W there. 50% retracement and then falling back down, I can live with. And so that's currently where I'm looking. Now we do have a green vector candle at the moment. I can't ignore that. That is basically off the PPI news. But again, on the 12-hour, 50 EMA, the blue line, that's what we've rejected from. And that's what's held us back all this time. We're coming back down. So I mentioned this in Discord, I think before I went away, that, it seems to be at the moment, there are, days where we have a 2,000, a 1,000, a 5,000, a 2,000, a $3,000 move. But they keep, at the moment, they're kind of, there is some volatility there, but they are still within a controlled level. We're not seeing those massive gains that I would like to have seen to get us out of this. And that V-shaped reversal obviously has, unfortunately, come to a halt. I won't say an end, a halt. Let's have a look, see if anyone's commented. Nope. Okay, perfect. Drop that one back down. So that's kind of how I'm looking at Bitcoin. And I put it, I've not even looked in the poll, but I did put in the poll, how often do you check your portfolio? How often do you check the price of crypto whilst you're away? There were times when I was leverage trading that I'd be checking it so often that I used to think most of my family thought I was either having an affair or was addicted to gambling, which you could argue I probably was with the leverage trade, because I just was constantly trying to see what the price of Bitcoin is. I think this holiday I've been fairly more relaxed, mainly because my son and daughter seem to take the majority of the time off my phone, so I can't even look at it. But I just need to have a look at the prices here, and I think, right, well, we start clearing 63,000 and start going north, I need to potentially worry. I'll talk about the levels with Tao later on as well. But right now, I'm quite happy with where the market is, and despite some news being positive, there's nothing really that's showing me that sentiment has necessarily shifted and we're out of this. And so I can be quite relaxed about it. So relaxed, in fact, I didn't actually even bring my Trezor out with me. So in terms of some of the things that are on my MetaMask or my Bitcoin itself, I can't really do too much about it anyway. But yeah, that's where we currently sit. Now, interestingly, where is it? It's closed. You know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I can't bother digging it out. It wasn't that important. It wasn't on the first page of the news, so I can't bother finding it. High block we've talked about, absolutely fine. And yeah, we'll keep CNC open. I did get a few questions from people today, so thank you very much. I'm going to try and tackle those now because I think they lead into some of the altcoin research as well. But again, I will come back to any that are put into the YouTube chat, and I'll try and answer those as well. Annoyingly, when I opened up the Google sheet, it had every single question that's ever been asked. So I actually can't tell which are the new ones. I've written in the date myself. So if you do ask a question and you get an opportunity to put the date in somewhere, if you can, that might just help me. I will probably just clear all the previous questions. I don't know why I keep them. I think these ones here are the ones that have been asked this week. Apologies if I've answered them in the past. If I have, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to ask about and to answer them again, just give a fresh view on it. But yeah, so Chris has said, if you could hold only 10 coins for the rest of the bull market, how would your portfolio look like, or what would it look like? I think it's a pretty interesting question. Well, let's have a look at how my portfolio looks at the moment. So nothing's changed with the business, still 100% BTC. Regardless of any of the dips, I have not sold any. Matter of fact, all I've done is buy more. So that sits there. When you start looking at the personal part, things have changed drastically. So now USDT makes up 33% of my portfolio. Why? I sold a large amount of Tau and I sold a large amount of DOT. NEAR still is sitting around about 26%. If that's the level it's been at for a fair few months now. The DOT position has halved as I have sold 50% of my DOT. Now, cards on the tables are why, for those of you that haven't read it in Discord, because I did post it in there. I still think DOT is a fantastic project. I think the fundamentals, what they've been out, Polkadot 2.0, async banking, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, brilliant. But I got to be realistic with myself as to whether or not I am holding on to something for waiting for a honeymoon period, or could there be better things that I put it in? Not to mention when we go through the charts a little bit later on, altcoins just look like a bit of a dog's dinner. So what I've done is I have sold 50%, and of that 50%, half, so 25%, was effectively what I'd done made from staking. So free DOT, so that's sold, and I don't ever intend on buying that back into DOT. That's going to go to other assets. Not necessarily too sure what yet, but it will. The other 25% is just a sidestep, and I'll show you the chart later on as to why. And then hopefully, when that does drop, I can ultimately eat back into some of the DOT that I sold and never intend on buying back. I hope that makes sense, but that's the thought process behind it. Tau, I mean, that's less than 9% at the moment. Obviously, with me selling 60% of my Tau a few weeks back. CAS, BTC, Render, Link, and Glimmer. So There's 9 tokens there. 9? Yeah, 9 tokens there already. 8 tokens if you don't include USDT. Of those tokens that I've got, for an ideal portfolio, I'm happy with all but 2. If I was to be realistic, I probably wouldn't hold Glimmer. It's so small because I sold 50% of my Glimmer quite a while back, so I'm just keeping the rest. I don't really even follow it anymore, which is probably a bad thing. But anyway, I probably, if I was to start again, I wouldn't have Glimmer. And obviously I'd be putting my USDT into other things. I think realistically, I'd hold more Bitcoin than 7%, just because Bitcoin dominance has been doing so well. Of some of the other ones that I'm looking at, I think really the easiest thing to do there is to just have a look at this right-hand side at the moment with how I break down sort of my watch lists. So the potential buy list here, Fetch or ASI, Entangled, that's probably not going to get rebought. Although I did like the premise of it. Tokenomics vesting schedules really messed that one up. This thing has died hard. And so maybe this is just going to need some time to recover. But Ondu, that is one that is definitely on my buy list at the moment. And it's actually in a price that I'd be happy to buy it at the moment. But that's one that I'd maybe add if I was to choose 10. Piff, yeah, potentially. I got Link now, so not sure whether or not I'd just be doubling up. Sol, I only monitor Sol and Townview because people talk about them quite a bit in terms of the state of the market. So, you know, if I added Ondu instead of Glimmer, that'd give me 9 out of the 10. Maybe keep some USDT in case something else caught my fancy. But I'm quite happy with the projects that I've bought in. I might not be happy with the price action as of late, but with the exception of CANs, nothing has actually done well in terms of price action. So for me, it's not a failing in the projects as such. It's just the way the market is being priced at the moment. And that's all it is. So, you know, yeah, you could have people moan, and I don't mind seeing people moan about Polkadot. You know, it's down at $4.50 or whatever it is at the moment. Not necessarily ideal, but everything is down. Tau's down, Render's down, Link's down, Bitcoin's down, Near's down. I say CAS is the only one that keeps on climbing. And so as long as they are generally falling in a similar manner and nothing's like absolutely nuking, then I don't necessarily have a problem with holding it. Yeah, okay. Perfect world, I would have put it all into CAS, obviously, or at least BTC to minimize the damage, but we can't just change that just off a whim. So yeah, so that's hopefully answers your question there. Chris has gone into our Samurai mentioned last weekend. The BitSensor team paid for the Kraken, Binance, and Crypto.com listing. Why don't you think that Casper Team Wales are not paying for a major exchange listing yet? I mean, one, it's a good question. Two, they may not feel that they need the need to it. You know, even without a significant tier 1 listing like Binance, it's still crawled up from from 1 cent to 20 cents over the last 18 months. It's still ranked number 30, I think, on CoinMarketCap. It's still one of, if not the most talked about altcoin, you know, in crypto spheres. So whether that be Twitter, YouTube, or whatever. So in terms of them having to necessarily pay it, I don't see why. They don't. Also, you've got to remember they don't have a marketing fund. So it's not like they just have a pot of money. They would have to go out to the community for that. And I get what you're saying. Why don't the initial devs or large whales pay for that? Well, you know, ultimately, why should they? If it's doing as well as it is doing on this, then why do that? Now, Binance is interesting because it does publish its own criteria of things that it needs for something to be listed. With that in mind, you know, it will happily list, you know, Bone, Book of Meme or whatever, or a meme coin that's just massively exploded because of hype. Yet it hasn't done that with Casper. Part of me thinks it's got to be a liquidity issue. They will need, given how popular it is, they'll need a significant amount of Casper on their books to be able to be traded and bought and sold. And so without that, they may be delaying it. Now, we are seeing that they are opening things like perps and also mining capability within Casper. So it does feel like the tides are shifting. I do feel that this will ultimately be something that is listed on Binance sooner rather than later. Given what we've seen, and last week I posted a spreadsheet of 25 tokens that are listed on Binance since the start of 2024. Only one of them has been in the green. The rest are all in the red, including BitTensor, which is actually down like 80%, or was, when it was $170, 80% from its listing high of 720. So wild that actually a Binance listing isn't as good as people think it is. Even if it does get listed on Binance, it doesn't help us in the UK because of the FCA and their rules means that it's deemed as too risky because in their minds it's too new and we don't know what we're doing with it. So we're going to have to stick with the likes of KuCoin, with Mexi and anything else that you can buy it from. But that's just complete speculation on my behalf, Chris. But hopefully it's some thoughts there. You've then gone on to say, do you have a price in mind where you consider getting into Tau Inu in anticipation of it piggybacking off the success of Tau and other meme coins in 2025? Well, Chris, sometimes I feel like you just want me to take a kick in from the community. I've mentioned this a lot, and I know two things. One, there's a lot of the community have invested in Tau Inu, so I want to be careful what I say. And two, Tau Inu and Zappy, there's people actually within the community that are actively working with and on those two projects. So I'm not throwing any shade or any salt towards them in terms of the effort that they're trying to work on or anything. But for me, I don't feel I will ever get back into Tau Inu or Zappy. I've mentioned this so many times before. With meme coins, it needs to catch fire, and it isn't. They haven't. And I mean, I got the chart open here. Oops. Yeah, we go to this is Dex Screener Tau Inu chart. We've had 19 transactions in the last 24 hours, 9 sales, 10 buys. But have a look at it. Let's just get rid of, can I minimize this? Can I hide sidebar? Okay, yeah. So look, right, what do we see happened? Middle of February, Simon announced that he was getting into Tau Inu, okay? And I got in as well, and I got in at 0.0028, so somewhere down here. I don't know where, but somewhere down there. I got in within 5 hours of Siam mentioning it, and I imagine a lot of RT did, and we continued to buy for a couple of weeks. It shot up, and then it collapsed. Then there was talk about this Mexi listing. It got listed on Mexi of a high of 4 cents. Since then, all it's done is just fall away. Now, I know altcoins in general have bled, and they have. But the problem with memes is they need to, as I said, they need to catch fire. They need to be talked about. They need to have something about because they have no utility. So they've got to be memeable. They've got to actually strike the interest in people. And this just, for me, hasn't. The volume down here as well, incredibly low. And it is lower high after lower high. It's lower low after lower low. And it's just falling away. And every pump that comes in is just met by a retracement back down. And unfortunately, all of these pumps here, they are like, just because the liquidity is so low, or the amount of orders are so low, it's normally just one or two buyers that massively move that price and then it comes back down. So, I mean, it's almost at the price that I originally got back in. You could argue that maybe I should throw some money at it just in case, but I'd rather put it into Tau, to be perfectly honest with you. Zappy, last time, I mean, most of the times I search for Zappy, I can't even find it because if you don't buy it within 24 hours, you see here, so because no one's made a transaction within 24 hours, it doesn't appear on Dex Screener. So, again, there's just zero interest in it. And so I'm not going to put money into something where there's no interest in it. And I get what people are necessarily saying in terms of, but when the bull market comes, a rising tide lifts all ships. It does to a certain extent. Back when we had 22,000 tokens, trust me, a lot of them didn't move with Bitcoin. Now we've got over 4 million tokens and most of those are memes. You've really got to be catching on fire there. So I just rather, hey, maybe it does move up. But is it really going to do 100x, 200x? Are we realistically, going back to Tau Inu, are you trying to tell me that you realistically think that this is going to get to $1? I mean, that's a 250x from its current position when it has 19 grand's worth of volume in 24 hours. I just don't see it. Zappy, again, similar kind of thing. So the last purchase was made yesterday at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, which is why you can't see it on Dex Screener. I can't do this, but again, Large pumps typically are made by one or two individuals, and then the price retraces back down. And this is continuing to make lower lows and lower highs. So again, just not for me. I wholeheartedly hope I'm wrong. I hope most of you sitting on your Tau New Island can tell me to F off in 2025 and that riding it out was worth it. For me, I cashed out in profit and I'm happy to put that in something else. So I will continue to follow it, and unfortunately I will give my honest opinion on it. If people don't like it, then apologies. You can switch off, fast forward for that bit, but that is just how I see it. Julia's put, hi, I bought Tau on Mexi back at the beginning of February. I've tried pulling the trading report from Mexi, but it's just a blank spreadsheet. I've screen printed what I can to get the trade info, but I'm missing the first set of trades from early Feb. Could you let me know how I can find these, please? So I mentioned this is one of the reasons why I'm stopped trading on Mexi if I absolutely can. And it's solely from a tax point of view. Not because I think Mexi, I don't know if Mexi is a dodgy exchange or not, but it has served its purpose for me. But like what Julia's experienced there, when I went to try and reconcile my taxes and I try and keep on top of these, after 30 days, I struggled to get accurate information. And I actually, if I was just to blindly input the information that was given from the API into my tax sheet, I would have been way off, because like yourself, let's say I made 90 trades, I actually only probably got 45 of them through the report. So the only thing I can suggest that you do is you have to reach out to support and explain that you want the full history of everything you've done from whatever day range it is. They should be able to collate that together. I did it, I think I was only a couple of days over the 30-day limit, so it wasn't necessarily too difficult. But Julia, and for anyone else that's struggling from that you do want to keep on top of your tax forms, or for whatever purpose that you're trying to collate that information, you've got to reach out to support. And then I would strongly advise, if this is something that you regularly want to do, either every 30 days, keeping on top of that and then sticking with Mexi, or if you're one of those people that only does it every 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, move into another exchange. There's plenty of other exchanges that sell Tau. The order book's pretty good, unless you're a super whale, and go from there. And then John's put, what are your thoughts on Tau? We missed that dip or potential for more downside. So that is what I'm going to move on to, talking about altcoins now, but let's just see if anyone's put anything in. Yep, there's a couple more there. Reese has put, do you have a reliable system for timing your long-term entries into alts? I don't know what you mean by that. Thank you, Stuart, for welcoming me on Tau New Island. I appreciate that. Reliable system for timing my long-term entries to alts. I don't know what you mean by that, Reese. In terms of how I got into them, I mean, most of my alt purchases, I'll be honest, were made in early 2023. So I was sort of DCAing in. I was looking back then at fib levels, but also previous price action from the bull runs, so and bear markets, and just going off the back of those. In terms of where I'm looking at them now, my system is very much price action, fib levels, EMAs. That's it. That's all I do. Now that can be difficult if you like Tau recently dropping down to 170. That was kind of difficult to see. There wasn't really a level at 170, which we'll have a look at in a second. But there's no other sort of fib that was kind of giving that one. So it turning around at 162, I think it turned around at. Kind of hard to judge. I thought maybe it might get down to 135. But that is all I really do. In terms of, I'm trying to think of whatever you might mean by a system. I think that's probably all I can think of from there. But maybe you might come back and update that one. But let's have a look at the altcoin market. Let's have a look at Tau first, because obviously this is the one that's of the biggest risk to me. So this is the one chart. I've not changed it. These lines, you could update these lines, but they've worked pretty well in the past. So I've just kind of kept them. So yeah, we've had that downtrend from the listing, even from before the listing, from March. Rest of the market, it's continued to fall down. So I am still of the opinion that unfortunately for Tau, it is in a downtrend. It's continued to be in a downtrend, and nothing has, from a sentiment point of view, has changed that. And so because of that, these low tests, and as good as they are, this one didn't play out. This one in the longer term, that only played out for about 2 days before falling away. But this one here, I don't think that is a reversal, because we're in the downtrend. And what have we had? We had that massive move back up, but where did we really get to? 320. Okay, that was, I mean, that was almost change the underwear time, because I was in the red, having watched it. Not that I went to sleep and missed it, but having watched it. And I was like, oh, should I get back in at 200, 230, 250, 240? I was like, no, trust the process. I think I know what I'm doing here. Don't knee jerk back into this. But what actually happened? Okay, we got to there, whip back down. 50 EMA, the 50 EMA, that brutal schoolyard bully that has basically just battered price down constantly. And even when it hasn't, something else has. And ultimately, that's where we find ourselves. Now, yeah, okay, we've got a little bit of noise at the moment, but the 10 and the 20, and then also this trend line here, that's creating a bit of difficulty for us right now to get through. But we're not really convincing ourselves that we're bouncing from it either. Even with the good news that Bitcoin's seeing with the bounce that it's had today, not reflected in the price of Tau right now. And so I'm sat on my hands kind of doing nothing. Now, I did have, a couple of days ago when it was up here, I set 285 and 265 as two buy levels, but I closed them all, cards on the table, because I'm watching it enough that I'll buy if it goes the wrong way. But for me right now, this feels, and you can argue feelings mean nothing, that we've had that move back up, but we are rolling over. Just like we've had this move up and we rolled over, just like we've had this move up and we rolled over, and this move up and we rolled over, this move up from the bottom and we ultimately rolled over. All we've done is hit this bottom trend line. Yes, we dumped through it, but we recovered it, but we've hit this bottom trend line and we just got back to the top trend line. And right now, the 50 EMA and the trend line are both below where I got out. So until we actually close above, build off that and move up, I kind of feel like I'd be doing myself a disservice. Now, my honest concern is, well, where do I wait? Because the only time we have lost the 50 EMA and we've climbed above it, we've been battered back down by the 200. Now, for me to wait to 350 and above to get back in, suddenly then, that's a fairly decent losing trade I've made, especially watching it from 170. So I haven't really made my mind up on what I do there. If we close above 310, say, and we start building towards that, do I actually then realistically have to say, you know what, I've got to get back in, I've just got to watch it and be a shark, and if it does turn from 350 and head back down, I can do that. But I don't have to worry about that just yet. And so that's where I see it, and it doesn't change my love for Tau and BitTensor, but the market is not loving it. The market is certainly thinking that 700 was far too overpriced, and it's coming back down. And we've talked about it. We talked about it at the start of the show. I don't think we can class this level of amateur ramblings as a show, but certainly the start of this live stream as potentially a head and shoulders there. And some people might argue, well, it's bounced off that and it's come back up. But if you add it on the weekly, that's all just part of the right-hand shoulder. Maybe it's not the cleanest. But yeah, that's kind of where I see Tau. Now, in terms of where can we get back in? All right, well, let's have a look. Had we, I appreciate this is a bit squashed because I've tried to get in, but previously we'd been running from here to here. So that's what we were working on. And we'd fallen through the floor and we were looking at these levels here. And some of these were picked kind of at random. But I was kind of looking at sort of like that 130, as I mentioned, 100. And then, it gets down to sort of like 60 odd, and that's like the completion of the level. So I potentially might have been greedy here when I saw this. The speed at which it was falling, I should have, I absolutely should have known that we'd have some sort of reaction from that. But I didn't do anything with it because I was greedy. And we all fall for it, don't we? In the height of it. That's what the battle's all about. But I certainly want to see a retest. Let's say 215, absolutely, I think. We lose 280. I do think 215. We start heading down, then 215 absolutely. But to be really brutally honest, I'm using this trend line. So that trend line suddenly there is sort of depending how long it takes, but 190, sub 200 certainly. And then it's a case of I will likely start to at least buy a little back in. and accept it may go lower. But I don't want to miss this opportunity, because, let's bear in mind, let's take back what I was saying about Bitcoin. That W formation being a much stronger position for us. Well, what do you think is going to happen if Bitcoin moves down? Fairly certain most altcoins, with the exception of probably Casper, will move down with it. So, we're going to see a W formation hopefully then. And so I don't want to really risk sitting on my hands and not trying to buy into that. So, some laddered buys, probably from 215 down, maybe all the way through this level. Maybe it's 215 down to 100, and accept that some of them don't get hit. But yeah, that's where I'm looking for Taonu. Now, if I have a look at DOT for you, you can't in a good conscience say to me, Harry, and I'm a DOT fan. I am a DOT fan. But again, fall away, bounce back up. This just it feels like a dead cat bounce, doesn't it? Now, I got out here like 450 to 460, and then had that nice move up. I could have got out at 490. I didn't, but what have we done? We've just fallen back down here again. And this 10 EMA on the daily, just batting us down at the moment. It just feels like this is actually going to roll over. And, when you look at some of these levels, my best buy this market cycle, I was very proud of it. Now it looks like I probably shouldn't have bothered, because I've almost round tripped it. Was down here at 360. 367 was where I got in at. We've actually already touched that a couple of days ago. And it kind of feels like that's at least the level we're going to go back to. And so for me, I just feel like I'll sidestep 50%. I would have sidestepped more, but 50% was on Kraken, so access to that within 10 minutes. 50% still on staked via Nova through the Polkadot network, 28 days. So we couldn't really go through the process of unstaking that. So I've had to take that little bit on the chin. But yeah, that to me just feels like this is rolling over. Maybe another W. That does feel certainly better for the W formation than the Tau one does. But a lot of altcoins are looking like they're just rolling over in this direction. And so that is unfortunately where I'm looking. Glimmer, same. Can't seem to break the 10 EMA. I'll come back to Casper, because I think we can spend some time talking about that. Link, again, not looking particularly great. Really struggling. So, yep, okay, we've sort of consolidated here, but we're not made any major moves up yet. 50's moving down. The 10 and the 20 spreading out quite nicely. Of course, it did that because I bought a little. Render, maybe, showing a little bit better life, because we've already hit this 800 EMA. Bounced off that one, we've come back down, potential W formation. Not to mention the fact that I would argue a lot of this fall here was probably due to, although it had been going on for a long time, the move away from render RNDR into render RENDER from Ethereum to Solana. And so that's probably not helped with things. It is in the AI sector. Again, there's another news article I was going to talk about. In the stock markets, that over stagnation potentially of AI, and people are just sort of falling out of love with it at the moment. Kind of seen that. Near's fallen hard, Tau's fallen hard, Render's fallen hard, Fetcher's fallen hard. A lot of those ones have actually fallen hard at the moment. Maybe that's a sign of where things are to come. As I said, Ondo's one that I'm looking at. So this is a real world asset. BlackRock, sort of based on their ETFs, not Bitcoin. And again, it had a really nice strong move up earlier on this year, beginning of the summer. It has started to fall away the rest of the market. Again, these all starting to spread out a little bit. And you can see now this 200 EMA is just starting to form this yellow line. I've had enough data for it now, and that is tying in with the 10, really sort of reacting off that one. But I think that, I don't have any real world assets really that's solely based on that. So that could be a good entry one there, but I'm just waiting to see where that one ends up going. So in terms of dot levels, sort of where I'd look to buy back in, I think we retest sort of 360, 350. I'd probably look to start buying in there. But to be honest with you, I'm going to be led by the break of the EMAs and just see when we actually start to do that. And ultimately, maybe even, where's my Bitcoin dominance? I mean, my Bitcoin dominance chart is still climbing. It's looking like Casper, this. Just can't stop climbing. And then you look at total 3, again, just not looking the healthiest at the moment. It's still, I mean, very much like Bitcoin actually. That's in terms of there is some form of bear flag formation, bull flag formation, that it's just working in and around there. But again, that fall back down, rolling over, maybe we do start to see it lose the $500 billion level, start to form on there. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I'm seeing things, unfortunately. I feel like I've probably rushed the last 10 minutes there, but a lot of things are looking very similar in the alt market. Why don't I sidestep some more? Because I could be wrong. And it's all about just balancing risk, isn't it? Both near and render, excellent entry positions, sort of, dollar for near, 160 for render. Yeah, they've gone down from where they were, but they're still nicely in the profit. I think I'm just happy with those. Link, I probably could, but I've just been stubborn on that one. And Kaz, I think that was the only one that's kind of going up, so why not keep hold of it? Glimmer won't really make a difference to my portfolio. And Bitcoin, I'm happy to hold on to the Bitcoin. With Bitcoin dominance continuing to go up, ultimately I can put that into altcoins at a later date when we start to see that bull market and that alt season start to kick back in. And then, I can recover some of those paper losses through just swapping it through to Bitcoin. So that's sort of kind of where the plan is on that. Any more questions? In terms of the 4-year cycle, Bitcoin dominance. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, can I find it? Can I find it in time? The problem with having so many different bloody layouts. Let's see if it's in the 4-year cycle one. You'd like to think it was. So this is, I've probably shown this before, and maybe now's not the time really to run through it towards the end of the call, but maybe next week I'll go through it if people are interested. But this 4-year cycle is kind of like a merger of a lot of different people's opinions, and I've just tried to put it cleanly onto one chart. But you can try and see year 1 starts when the bear market ends, and it's a BTC running year. Year 2, it's still BTC heavy. BTC dominance is still climbing, and then towards the back end of the year, we start to see alts make that revival. And we are in a BTC to alts year. So BTC dominance is still climbing, but we do expect, if it's going to follow the 4-year cycle as it has done in the past, for that to kick in. Year 3 is silly season. It is alt season. It's the massive rise up. And yes, Bitcoin still climbs, but alts are climbing far harder. And then year 4, bear market, it's return to stables. And so I jumped that too early. I wholeheartedly admit I went into alts a lot sooner than I probably should have done. Bear in mind, I also had a large amount of BTC last year that I sold for alts in October when Bitcoin made its big run. So, was it October? It's a 50K anyway, whatever the price was around then. And so maybe I did jump it, but that's kind of like big picture stuff. And because it's so big picture, I rarely look at it. But nothing's really changed in this pattern. And everyone says, this time it's different. But right now, Bitcoin dominance is still climbing, still saying year 2, it's still a Bitcoin year, but we will see at some stage that shift towards altcoins. We haven't really seen it yet. Maybe when we get October, we might. But yeah, we shall have to see where it goes. So that's how I run that one, Reese. Hope that helps. Let's have a look at the poll. Just intrigued. Thanks for everyone that added in on the poll. Where is it? So when you're on holiday, how often do you check the price of crypto? It's once or twice a day, 45% there. You are better than me. About the same as I usually do, 36%. Never, I need a break, 18. Actually, you know what? You really are the heroes here. More than usual, 0. I think I'm probably about the same. It's so easy on my phone. On my phone, I have a little widget, like even on the lock screen, it gives me what Bitcoin dot and Tau have done from a percentage point of view. So I kind of just always get a look at it whenever I pick my phone up, which kind of gives me an idea of whether or not I need to unlock my phone and actually have a look at stuff. But yeah, I think that's probably going to be it. I think we've kind of come to a natural end there. What I would say is thank you for putting up with this one. I know it's a little bit different. Hopefully, still able to cover most of the things you needed to hear about, or probably didn't want to hear about, but they are my views as always. If you do have any questions, again, next week, hit up. I admit, and I did put in Discord, I've not been as active, just 'cause I'm trying to, during the day, just trying to spend time with the family. So I will try and like answer questions and DMs, etc. in the evenings. I may take a couple of days to get back to you, particularly if it's a difficult question. But please keep on sending them through. I promise you I will. I am still on holiday next week, so it will be a similar kind of setup to this. But the week after that, I am back. I won't be at the trading pub on Thursday. I think we've got, I saw something on Telegram from Simon about we've got a guest speaker. I can't remember who it is now, but it should be an interesting one. I'll try and catch up on that. If I can think of some questions, I might send them to Simon ahead of time. But thanks again. I'm going to drink the rest of my beer because it's going rather warm. Enjoy the rest of your evening, enjoy the rest of your week, and I will speak to you all soon. Cheers now. Got to find a way of turning this off now. Normally I can do it from another screen, but we'll work it out. Enjoy your evening, everyone. Cheers. Bye.